My name is Jim Schwartz, and I'm the fire chief in Arlington County. I've been with the county for a little over 26 years, and I've been proud to be the chief now for exactly 6 years. I think one of the most important aspects of a resilient community is the relationships that get built. And I would use the word relationship instead of partnership, although I think that that's an attribute of a good partnership. Because I think people have to get to know each other and understand what it is we need from each other as we come from issues of preparedness and resilient communities from occasionally different directions, different perspectives. Our needs are different. Sometimes we even see our goals as being different, and deconflicting that as much as possible I think is extremely important. So I think the relationships can be formed really in several areas. One is at the community level, neighborhoods that can develop relationships with each other. And I think sometimes in modern life we've gotten away from even sometimes knowing who our neighbors are. And a great example of resilience can be found in whether or not we're taking care of our neighbors in the middle of something as simple as a snowstorm. Is the neighbor who gets her meals from Meals on Wheels or gets her prescriptions delivered, what kind of disruption, what kind of obstacle does a simple weather event present for her, and who in the neighborhood might be checking up on her? So I think the relationships we have at a neighborhood level is really important. I think the next level of relationship can be between communities, neighbors, and their government, their local government. And there I think it's important for people to understand, on our side in government, we need to understand what our neighborhoods need, what kinds of things that we can provide for them, and be very frank in what we'll be unable to provide for them in a crisis, so that they can begin to build some of that capacity. We're setting an expectation for them, and then they're beginning to build some capacity on their own, to be able to meet or understand those expectations. And then I think another important set of relationships is between governments, intergovernmental kind of relationships. Building a lot of what we have here in Northern Virginia with our partners in Alexandria and Fairfax, and even extending out as far as Prince William and Loudoun counties. There's an interdependence. We share resources, we do joint planning. There is an understanding that for any crisis, none of us, even the bigger jurisdictions, are going to be able to sustain themselves by themselves. They're going to need assistance. So more than just at the moment where the crisis becomes apparent and presents itself, but all the way up through the cycle of preparedness, understanding how we can communicate better, how we can build expectations there, how we can do joint planning, and maybe even how we can resource jointly so that we're not over-investing in one particular area. Maybe there are opportunities where a jurisdiction can take on one responsibility that another jurisdiction knows that's where we're going to get that resource, that's where we're going to get that capability. So I think relationships at a neighborhood level, relationships between a community and its government, and then relationships between governments are some of the most important aspects of resilience. Again, harking back to the neighborhood efforts, here in Arlington, like many communities, we have a CERT team, a community emergency response team. And I actually might better refer to that as multiple teams, but they are all organized in a way where the leadership is all centralized. But the leadership tried to build the teams at a neighborhood level so that they could gain the advantage that comes from affinity, from people who already know each other or see what's going on in their neighborhood as some sort of shared investment. What I'm really most proud of with Arlington CERT is that government, we don't take a really strong role. We have no leadership role in CERT at all. We provide instruction and we provide a space for the CERT teams to organize themselves, but they are self-managing. They communicate with themselves. Their leadership takes on the responsibility of scheduling and organizing all of the training, and they simply turn to us and ask us if we can provide our technical expertise to the CERT teams to help them understand what they're in for and what kind of, to sort of build their skill level. Should they, be called on to deploy in a crisis. And calling on them to deploy is most often done by their leadership, not by our emergency management agency, not by the fire department or the police department. They are tuned into our systems of communication throughout the county, our alert networks, and when they see that there's an issue that they think that they need to address, almost in an organic way, they do that. I think they take from that sort of that self-sufficiency. I think they take a great deal of pride in all of that. And so we do what we can to support them, but it's not something that we have to manage, and I think they're the better for that. Harking back to the 9/11 experience, a lot has been written and a lot has been reviewed about the response itself. Many judgments, it was a very successful response. One of the big takeaways for us out of that event was that we really didn't do as good a job as we could have done in communicating with the public, in communicating with those that were not affected but nonetheless were anxious about the events as they unfolded, both in New York and here in Arlington over the course of those several days. So we learned a lot about how to build public messaging systems and keep connected to the community so that we were providing for them a kind of situational awareness. And I think that's always important to lessen anxieties, lessen the stress when a crisis hits a community. In another example, I think that while we stood up our Emergency Operations Center to support the incident and maintain stability in the rest of the community, a couple of days into 9/11, we also did something more unique, and that was that we established an Emergency Operations Center that was focused exclusively on getting National Airport back open. Many may remember that in the wake of 9/11, the airport was closed, and there were legitimate questions about whether or not it would ever open again. It is so close to the national monuments, to the center of government, the national government, that there were a lot of questions as to whether or not commercial air traffic would ever transit that airport again. And in fact, private aircraft to this day still does not use that airport. That's been shut down. But the reestablishment of the commercial traffic and the reopening of the airport came, I think, in large part to the efforts of the local leadership here, the elected leadership, as well as the county manager, who recognized that the community's viability was connected very strongly to that airport, to the operation of the airport. Obviously, our proximity to Washington, D.C., and the huge hotel industry that we have here in Arlington was going to be adversely affected if that airport didn't open, and if all the people who were visiting the Washington metro area would have had to do so through Dulles Airport about 20 miles to the west, or Baltimore Washington International Airport about 35 miles to the north. So they worked very hard with national elected leaders, our congressional delegation, and made the case about the economic viability of not just Arlington, but I think the region as a whole, and why that airport was so important. I think sometimes when we talk about resilience, we are talking about the human effects, and those are important, but the economy and the state of the economy, how strong the economy can be, especially at the local level, I think has to be thought of in terms of resilience. Well, I think that the notion that there is going to be, or should be even, something called national resilience, I think misses the mark a little bit. While we certainly want to build resilience across the nation, I believe that this really has to be grassroots. The fact is that people in our community and in communities all across the country on a daily basis are focused on what's happening around them. As much as the impact of 9/11 or even anthrax in the Washington area and the New York area had across the country, I think it's safe to say that the effects, the reactions were all too short-lived. They were more momentary for most people outside this region or the region of New York. I think it's fair to say that right now, as we watch the oil continue to spew in the Gulf, that a lot of people are aware of it, but it's not having meaning for them in their daily lives. So resilience, I think, has to be thought of in terms of what's impacting people, where they live, where they work, something that touches them, on a fairly regular basis. So community resilience, I think, is a better way to orient our thoughts as opposed to national resilience. And I think if we build enough at the community level and we transfer the knowledge and establish smart practices by virtue of community resilience, we can network resilient communities all across the country and in effect build national resilience. So in Arlington, we've looked at a host of ways to engage the community. The first is that we have gone to great lengths to figure out how to communicate with them on a fairly regular basis, and certainly when we face a crisis. So we established a text messaging system that's a subscriber-based system. People in the community sign up and we send them messages to their text receiving device whenever something's happening, and people can actually select the kinds of messages that they want to receive. If there's a crisis impacting the county, everybody's going to get the message. But if you want weather alerts or you want traffic alerts, if you want alerts to stay away from particular areas based on more localized incidents, we'll provide that information for you, but you get to choose how you're going to get that information so we don't overwhelm you. We also created our own AM radio station that's just for Arlington. Arlington is a very densely populated community. We have over 200,000 people that live in about 26 square miles. And so it's very densely populated, very urbanized. But the fact is that the media market for the Washington metropolitan area is far more diverse, and oftentimes incidents occurring in Arlington or in the larger region will be reported from the focus of the Washington, D.C. perspective, or perhaps Montgomery or Fairfax counties, given their size. So Arlington can get lost if our citizens are looking for information. They may not be able to get information that's relevant to them if the focus of the incident is somewhere else in the region. So the AM radio station only targets people in Arlington. And in addition to that, it provides us the opportunity to put our leaders on the air so that our citizens can actually hear from people that they choose to represent them and make decisions about difficult issues. We enhanced our reverse 911 system so that we can actually call every household in the county in very rapid fashion. Our old system, it used to take 11 or 12 days to call every residence. We now have a system that can do it in just hours so that we can give an additional level of alerting. And we're actually testing now sirens. We are bringing back outdoor warning because we recognize that despite all the other methods that we have developed for communicating with our citizens, there may be times when they are not near one of the devices and be out on the street somewhere. And so in various locations we have installed modern day, very sophisticated outdoor warning devices that some may recognize from the Cold War alerting era of decades ago, but in fact have become so modernized and so sophisticated that we can now test them without making a sound. They're connected to computers, and we are able to check the workings of the device without bothering anybody for anything other than a true emergency. So public communications and being able to message them in a crisis is an area that we've paid a lot of attention to and will continue to pay attention to, because we find, again, that connection between us and the community is just absolutely vital.